1977 TV. Nicholas Hammond. Before billion-dollar suits and alien technology, Spider-Man's first live-action web shooters were built by hand in a basement. Nicholas Hammond's Peter Parker engineered them himself in the 1977 Amazing Spider-Man TV series. Bulky wrist-mounted devices with block-shaped cartridges strapped to his forearms and backup reloads clipped to his belt. The webs fired thick, rope-like strands. Limited range, limited function. One setting. They were the largest web shooters ever worn on screen. Oversized, heavy, and completely mechanical. But they worked. And more importantly, they proved Spider-Man didn't need powers to build his own tools. That principle carried forward into every version that followed. The problem was that the technology had nowhere to go from here, until Japan ignored the technology entirely. Japanese spider bracelet. Takuya Yamashiro. Japan didn't upgrade the web shooter. Japan replaced it with something from another planet. Takuya Yamashiro, the Japanese Spider-Man, received the spider bracelet from an alien civilization. A single wrist-mounted device that stored his entire Spider-Man suit, fired multiple web attack types, and could summon Leopardon, a giant mech robot, when ground-level combat wasn't enough. Web shooters became a complete combat system in one move. No reloading, no cartridges, no limitations tied to Earth-based engineering. The spider bracelet operated on alien technology with no explanation required and no ceiling established. It remains the only web shooter in Spider-Man history that can end a fight by calling a robot. Hollywood eventually returned to mechanical web shooters, but with a significant intelligence upgrade attached. The Amazing Spider-Man, Andrew Garfield. Andrew Garfield's Peter Parker built his web shooters from watch parts. Not Stark technology, not alien equipment. Watch parts. The devices were compact, hidden under leather wrist straps, with small fluid indicators showing exactly how much web remained. Clean design, practical engineering, completely self-built. The web fluid itself came from Oscorp, a biocable originally developed from genetically altered spiders, rated at 10 times the tensile strength of steel. Peter didn't invent the material. He figured out how to use it better than Oscorp ever intended. The Amazing Spider-Man 2 upgraded the design to a hexagonal shooter, until Electro's electricity disabled them completely mid-fight. Gwen Stacy magnetized the system from the ground to bring it back online. One of the few times Peter's web shooters required someone else to save them. Unused concept art for the sequel revealed the shooters were originally designed to include an MP3 player. It never made the film. The feature would have been completely useless in combat, and that's exactly why it's fascinating. The next Spider-Man started with even less impressive equipment, and somehow built further from it. MCU, homemade. Tom Holland. Tom Holland's Peter Parker made his web fluid in a high school chemistry lab. He stored spare cartridges under school lockers so he could reload without anyone noticing. The web shooters themselves were assembled from scrap materials, functional, lightweight, and completely detachable from his wrists if an opponent grabbed them during a fight. That vulnerability cost him several times before Tony Stark noticed what he was building. The homemade versions had no tactical modes, no settings, no upgrades. One web type, manually fired, with cartridges that ran out at the worst possible moments. Peter compensated by getting creative, using basic web shots in ways the shooters weren't designed for. That creativity is what Stark saw, not the equipment. The mind is using it. Which is why everything changed the moment Stark decided to rebuild them. Stark Tech, Spider-Man Homecoming Suit. Tony Stark took Peter's homemade shooters and turned them into a tactical weapons platform. The upgraded devices integrated directly into the Stark suit. Holographic controls, laser targeting, spider tracers, HUD integration, and the spider signal built in as standard features. Every component is connected to Karen, the suit's AI, giving Peter real-time combat analysis alongside his web attacks. Then Karen revealed the number that changed everything. 576 web combinations. Built-in, accessible mid-fight, ricochet webs, splitter webs, web grenades, taser webs, shield webs, timer webs, arrow webs. Each one is designed for a specific tactical situation. Peter admitted Stark had completely overdone it, then spent the rest of Homecoming discovering he hadn't even scratched the surface of what the suit could do. These weren't web shooters anymore. They were a modular combat system that also happened to fire webs. Stark still wasn't done. Iron Spider, nanotechnology. The Iron Spider armor removed the last remaining limitation of traditional web shooters, the shooter itself. Built entirely from nanotechnology, the web firing system was seamlessly embedded into the suit rather than worn as an external device. Faster deployment, higher reliability, no exposed mechanisms to disable or damage during combat. The system operated alongside 4 mechanical spider legs extending from the back, allowing Peter to fire webs, defend from multiple angles, and maintain mobility simultaneously. The armor's durability was rated for space combat, which it proved during the opening battle of Infinity War. The nanotech also solved the reload problem permanently. Web fluid is replenished automatically from the suit's internal reserves. Running out mid-fight was no longer a tactical concern. Peter wasn't wearing web shooters at this point. He was wearing a weapon system that included web capability as one feature among many. Animation pushed the concept further than live action was willing to go. Spider-Verse, Miles Morales and Miguel O'Hara. Miles Morales received his first proper web shooters from Aunt May, standard mechanical devices that function normally, until his bioelectric powers activated during the Kingpin battle. The webs turned blue and started crackling with electricity on contact. A standard web shooter, supercharged by the user's own biology, producing an entirely different weapon than the device was built to create. Miguel O'Hara's technology in Across the Spider-Verse operated differently. His webbing was smart, capable of curving through the air mid-flight and splitting into multiple independent strands targeting separate points simultaneously. The device on his wrist primarily functioned as dimensional travel equipment. The webbing itself was integrated into the suit at a level that made the shooter and the weapon indistinguishable from each other. The Spider Society surrounding Miguel displayed the full range of where web technology had arrived. Web guns, photonic web shooters, and systems built into vehicles and robots. No single standard, no ceiling. The games took everything the films established and turned it into a combat engine. Insomniac Games, advanced combat platform. Insomniac's Spider-Man built web shooters designed specifically for combat evolution. Both Peter and Miles constructed custom versions that expanded through play. Impact webs, electric webs, and web bombs, and crafted upgrades that rewarded completely different fighting approaches. The system wasn't static. It changed based on how the player used it, which made every encounter a different tactical problem. Peter's symbiote arc added a visual layer. Webs turned black after bonding with the symbiote. But when the shooters malfunctioned, the black webs disappeared entirely. The symbiote changed the appearance. The shooters were still doing the actual work. That detail matters. It confirmed that even symbiote-enhanced Spider-Man depended on mechanical web shooters at his core. Superior Spider-Man proved what happened when someone decided the core needed replacing. Superior Spider-Man. Otto Octavius. Otto Octavius took control of Peter Parker's body and immediately decided Peter's web shooters weren't good enough. He developed a new web formula, stronger, more durable, and rated bulletproof under standard conditions. Then he upgraded the devices themselves with built-in cameras and sonar sensors for tracking and navigation that functioned independently of the suit's external systems. The upgraded shooters fed data to Otto's Spider-Bot network, turning web shooter deployment into part of a citywide surveillance operation. Every web fired was also gathering information. Otto didn't just build better web shooters. He turned them into intelligence-gathering tools that happened to also immobilize enemies. His engineering reflected one principle: intelligence should always outperform instinct. Whether anyone agreed with his methods or not, the superior web shooters justified the title. The comics then took web technology into territory no live-action version had attempted: cosmic, magical, and multiversal variants. One alternate Spider-Man replaced web fluid with bullets, a designated assassin whose shooters fired ammunition instead of polymer strands. Another version, where Peter became the Punisher, fitted his web shooters with a chain gun magazine loaded with armor-piercing, explosive, and incendiary rounds built specifically for superhuman targets. Spider-Boy from the Amalgam universe carried a web pistol instead of wrist-mounted launchers, handheld, holstered, and fired like a sidearm. The MCU briefly introduced the furthest upgrade seen in live action. Doctor Strange enchanted Peter's web shooters during No Way Home, allowing them to fire mystical webs capable of teleporting multiversal villains directly into magical containment. Standard polymer became a dimensional capture system through a single enchantment. Parker Industries developed red web shooters with future-rated specifications in the comics. Spider-Gwen's universe created moisture-powered systems that reduced manual refill dependency entirely. Every alternate reality treated the web shooter as an unsolved problem, and each one found a different solution. The result across the full multiverse is a weapon that has been a bracelet, a bullet gun, a dimensional device, a nanotechnology system, a magical trap, and a robot summoner. The web shooter started as a block cartridge strapped to a wrist in 1977. What it became across Marvel's multiverse has no upper limit.